Welcome, welcome. We're back again. It's Dr. Andrea Pennington here, helping you tune into the power to change your personal narrative by looking at your life through the framework of the hero's journey. I hope that you are doing well today. I don't know if you've already seen one of my live masterclasses or the replay on the transformative power of storytelling, but this is my jam. This is the thing I am into. We have the capacity to change our narrative. And by narrative, we mean the story. There is a story that you tell yourself about yourself, and that story dictates a whole lot of your reality, what happens in your life, in your body, in your relationships, in your business, and success. So, one of the key things that we want to tune into is our power to reclaim authority in life. And that means you taking the rightful power to share your story, to change your story. If you've previously been living a somewhat less than heroic vibe, if you've been feeling like the victim or the underdog in life, then this is an invitation for you to start looking at the stories that you tell yourself. So, a lot of the time, as a therapist, I will invite people to look at where these stories came from in the first place. And this is one of the gifts that has come from the work of narrative therapy. So I talk a lot about the hero's journey, as was described by Joseph Campbell, the American mythologist who studied myths and fables and tales across cultures and across time. And Joseph Campbell found that these very common themes showed up in stories. We as humans have transmitted information across time, through generations, through telling stories. And even when we don't have the same language patterns as other people, there's something about story that can communicate emotion, meaning, education. And for me, the turning point with really recognizing that I could change my own narrative was when I was studying the work of Joseph Campbell at university. So when I was a pre-med biology major, I was also studying a lot of film and theater because I'm a performer at my heart. And it was during one of our film classes that I was introduced to the book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces by Joseph Campbell. And in this book, he shares all of these different stories or storylines and the various archetypes. So if you've ever heard of Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, then you may have already heard of archetypes. Archetypes are kind of like a global pattern for the psyche. They're different personality types and themes that come forward across cultures. And when people at Disney and George Lucas, the creator of the Star Wars franchise, when they discovered this common pattern to storytelling, which is what we call the hero's journey, they realized that you could hook an audience in and really create emotion and transformation in the audience. And then jumping forward an additional 15 years when I became a physician and started in my trauma training, helping people recover from adverse childhood experiences, dysfunctional families, and out and out trauma, I discovered that we could apply this same heroic journey to multiple transitions and points in our lives. But most importantly, we could use the hero's journey to take back our power, to find our true voice, and to become who we want to become in this life. Because I don't know about how things were for you at home, but for most of us, we weren't always nurtured to become our most authentic self. We got molded and folded to fit in, to toe the line, to march to someone else's orders. And if you happen to experience some sort of trauma or adversity in your childhood, then part of you might have taken on beliefs or made up stories about what happened that impact who you think you are, what you're worthy of, what you're capable of doing. And those stories from the past might be running you today, and they may not be as empowering as you would want them to be. And so, by applying this hero's journey framework in my clinical practice, working with patients, I was able to nurture this capacity that we all have to change our narrative. And it can be transformative, because even if something terrible happened to you in your past, or even if you've done something terrible in your past, it doesn't have to dictate the rest of your life. And that's the thing. Many of us think that I'm a bad person because I did bad things, or I'm cursed because all these bad things keep happening to me. And that is sort of a fixed mindset that is not very empowering. And so I want to show you how you can use this framework to look at your life and to recognize that you are the hero you've been waiting for. You are ready to step into another expression of your life and your destiny. And each and every one of us is on this journey of the soul. Now, for some people, they're saying, okay, that sounds really simplistic. You mean I can just choose to tell a different story and my life will change? Yes, you actually can. So, by that I mean, for many years of my life, I just felt like I had to be the good girl. And there was an unconscious story that I told myself. And this unconscious story was not something I repeated. It was not something I was even aware of. But there was this intense feeling that I needed to always prove myself. I always needed to get things right. I always needed to be studying and coming up with facts. And that started in my childhood. But the thing is this, even when I got to adulthood and I realized like all of that perfectionism, all of that drive to produce or achieve was wearing me out, like literally wearing me out. Kind of like my voice is worn out after doing 3 interviews today. But what I realized was I was living a pattern that had started in childhood that was mostly unconscious. And even when I was conscious of it, I kind of felt justified. Like, well, yeah, I need to do well. I need to get ahead. I need to shine. I need to show up. And all of that is true. And all of that can actually be good until it almost led me to burnout. And I had to wake up to the fact that that narrative was driving these compulsive behaviors and was at the root of me not ever feeling good enough. And so a lot of the work that I do in therapy sessions, whether that's with or without psychedelics, it's helping people recognize that these different stories that we're telling are either empowering us, moving us forward with post-traumatic growth, or they are disempowering and they're keeping us stuck. Does this make sense to you? If you'd like to, you can type into the chat where you're tuning in from, what you're hearing. I'm looking for my little window of comments. So is this making sense to you, perhaps? Hopefully. So for me, I had to take control of that narrative. And it was through doing the very same work that I do with patients to identify the source of these stories and to start making new meaning. Because the stories that we tell ourselves can literally dictate your physiology. So if you have a story that the police are always out to get you, it can literally change your physiology the moment you see a police officer, right? Maybe this sounds weird to you, but not everybody gets an elevated heart rate or blood pressure or a fear in the pit of their stomach when they see law enforcement. But if you have a story in your subconscious that cops are bad, they're out to get you, it can change your physiology. And so we want to bring these stories to the forefront so that we can start to investigate. And most importantly, what I want to know is, are they true? are these stories even true? And even if it were true, what about changing it? Are you aware that you could change the narrative? So I used to have such fond admiration for a patient of mine who came in to see me and said, I feel like I have a target on my head because no matter where I go, no matter what environment I'm in, I seem to always attract these people who abuse me. And I thought that that was really curious. And I said, tell me more. And she was able to describe how she was being bullied and harassed in her corporate job. And that mirrored an experience that she had at university. And that mirrored the experience in her childhood, where she was picked on, and bullied by her older siblings, as well as her father. And she says, why is this pattern repeating? And for most of us, if something bad happens to you, we'll adapt. You'll make some sort of a change. And so when we started to ask some questions, it became clear that she felt like a victim. Now, I'm no person to argue. She was a victim. She was harassed and picked on, often for no reason at all, just because she existed. But here's the thing. If you collapse the story and mirror it with your identity, in other words, if you identify as a victim, then of course life is going to keep delivering you experiences of victimhood. If you believe that you are a victim, how likely are you to go out and try new things or to expand and to grow? Because our stories hold up all of our beliefs and assumptions and our actions. So once we started to apply the narrative therapy process that's outlined in my book, The Real Self-Love Handbook, what I started to see is what we can do is we can look at the past. We're not saying to deny that things happened, but we can look at the past and find the lessons. What are the things that you learned? What are the biases that you now have as a result of what happened in the past? Are there actually things that you have changed based on what happened? And is there a part of you that is now carrying a belief that's outdated? So in other words, if I felt like this one's actually true, I'm the youngest in the family, and the difference in age is 6 and 12 years in my brother and sister that I grew up with, and I have an even older brother and older sister. And I always felt like the baby of the family because that's what people called me. Oh, you're the baby of the family. And I hated it, but it sort of also got me treated a certain way. And I finally had to stop people. I was like, stop calling me the baby of the family. I'm an adult. Yes, I am the youngest, but there's all this energy attached to being the quote unquote baby of the family. Does that make sense? And so ultimately, I had to change that narrative and start restructuring who I am in the now and going forward. So, are there parts of your life that maybe need a little tune up? Are there parts of your life that you know you're being held back because there are some mental stories, some biases, and some beliefs that you're holding on to that really don't serve you? Well, once you start to look at the past and the lessons and look at maybe the assumptions, beliefs, and biases that you've taken on, maybe even the behaviors that you've compensated with, then you can start to change them. So, for example, if you feel like you were always a victim, maybe what you can take now is take all of those lessons and become a, an activist or an advocate for yourself or for others. You can use that information from the past to inform you in a more heroic or confident way moving forward. So this is something that we do at Make Your Mark Global. I run a retreat called Stories with Soul, and we, over a 2-day intensive, really go through the stages of the hero's journey, which typically starts off with what we call the call. So, in all of the good fairy tales and superhero movies, there is a calling. So, our hero is typically in their ordinary world, doing whatever. They may be really feeling crappy, or they may be on top of the world. But then there's a call. It could be a literal call on the phone, or it could be an internal feeling of this need to change, this need to explore, this need for something new. The call is the call to adventure. And typically, the hero has to make a decision. Do I want to leave the comfort or at least the familiarity of my ordinary world? Do I want to go out into the unknown? For a lot of us, we refuse the call. That is part of the hero's journey. I talk about this a lot. For example, with psychedelic medicine, I first heard the call to ayahuasca back in 2007 when I was at this trance dance event. And it was intriguing, the idea of this medicine that comes from the Amazon and it's served by a shaman in the jungle. But when our medicine man explained that you had to dig a hole out in the jungle in the dark that would be where you would puke and poop into while you're having this hallucinatory experience, I was like, no. I heard the call and I said no, right? So that's the typical beginnings of the hero's journey. But then there typically is a mentor. There is some supernatural force, or it could be a person. I could be that person for you. There is a person who gives the hero either some information or some special powers or coaching and mentoring to boost their confidence and help them overcome the fear that then allows the hero to step across the threshold. For me, it happened 10 years later. I had heard the call, I had heard about ayahuasca, I had even done some research, but in 2017, when I was in Peru, I had my moment. And I happened to hear the call again, but this time there was this beautiful ayahuasquera at the retreat center who had been trained by a lineage of ayahuasqueros. Some people call them shamans. Most true shamans don't use that word, but she came from a long lineage of healers, people who had been trained in the jungle. And I felt comfortable and confident, like she gave me what I needed to step across the threshold into the unknown world. And typically, once the hero crosses that threshold, there's all these opportunities, there's tests, you start to meet some friends and some allies, and you might also meet some new enemies. It's this uncharted territory. And so for me, crossing the threshold was sitting in ceremony with ayahuasca. Once the hero is across and they're experiencing new tests and challenges, finding out who are their allies and who are their enemies, then typically the hero will move to a point where they're at a point of no return. It's like they start to realize, I can't go back. I can't go back to my old way of life. You're starting to get a feel that there's this new version of you that's calling to you, that the goal that you're looking to achieve or the thing you're trying to win or claim is so big that you're willing to say, I'm all in. And for me, that happened when I finally got to the point in the ayahuasca ceremony where it was like, I needed to let go and surrender because my ego, my mind was trying to hold on and, not get freaked out. And so once we hit that point of no return, typically, again, there's going to be some tests and some challenges, but the hero generally starts to realize, like, I can become something new and different. And then we move into the next phase, which Joseph Campbell called the approach to the inmost cave. And this is when the hero kind of goes into almost like an incubator or into a literal cave where you're gathering up the necessary resources and maybe dusting off, your clothes or nursing your wounds, gathering up your strength to prepare for the next major battle. And that battle in the movies is often fighting a dragon or fighting an alien, right? Or fighting the enemy. But for us personally, you might have had to go into the cave as you were working on your dissertation, or you were going through a drug treatment program, and the fight for your life was really there, right? And so we go into that cave, we nurse our wounds, and maybe we still have the message from that mentor ringing in our ears and giving us that hope. And then ultimately, we come to the life or death battle. And this is typically like the climax in the movies, where the hero will literally experience death. Now, it could be physical death, like you see in the movies, or it could be a metaphorical death, meaning the you of the past dies and you take on this new energy of who you are intended to be. And so it's this sort of death and rebirth, fighting that dragon or winning whatever special prize that you needed to do. The hero emerges. And then the hero gets to a point where you've gotten the reward. Maybe that was claiming the sword or the elixir. You fought the dragon, you won whatever beautiful being was waiting for you. And now it's the road back home. And the road back home is an opportunity for the hero to take what they've learned back to their ordinary world. But they're a completely new being. In fact, they may have even become resurrected, going through the last final battles. Because just because you won doesn't mean there's not still someone trying to hate on you or trying to pull you down. But you come resurrected. You become this new version of you, and you return home to share whatever it is you claimed, whether it's the elixir or it's this new knowledge. You want to bring it back to save your people or to inform your people. And so these stages of the hero's journey, you have already been through them multiple times. We could really look at the hero's journey starting at your birth. Like the breaking of the water, the amniotic sac is kind of like the call. It's like, oh, okay, here we go. Contractions are picking up now. And, you go through all of these stages. It could be getting married or going off to college or starting your first job. Like, you literally will go through that entire cycle of the hero's journey. And so one of the things that we do at Make Your Mark Global is we train people to use the hero's journey to tell what we call a turning point story. There's a turning point in most of our lives where we hear a call. It may be internally, like we have no choice. Like, it's like you gotta change or die, And that turning point can make a really beautiful story that can help other people. So all of our books at Make Your Mark Global are meant to inspire, to inform, and to empower people. And I have to tell you, because we have 2 opportunities for you to share a story in one of our upcoming books. It could be a turning point that led you to sacred medicine, or a turning point of when you used sacred medicine, whether that's psilocybin mushrooms, ayahuasca, Wachuma or San Pedro. It could be frog medicine, Kambbo, or toad medicine like Bufo, 5-MeO-DMT. MDMA, not exactly a psychedelic, but people consider it a sacred medicine as well. So we're looking for people to share a story in this upcoming book, and we have an entire training process to help you tell your story using the hero's journey. And this can be wonderful if you're a coach or a healer and you want to inform the world of what you do, but also give a little more of the backstory of how you came to the work. The other book that we're publishing is the 2nd edition of The Top 10 Traits of Highly Resilient People. And this book is, over there. This book was first published in January of 2020. And we had no idea that it was going to become a bestseller instantly as we headed into the COVID pandemic. And we had beautiful stories from people around the world talking about how one of these 10 traits of resilience help them bounce back after adversity or even bounce forward with post-traumatic growth. And so we got inspired to publish the second edition because we want more stories of resilience. So if you feel like you've been on a heroic journey of the soul and you've either come through with more resilience or you were supported by sacred medicine, then I invite you to visit makeyourmarkglobal.com and you can learn more about our co-authoring opportunities. It's a wonderful way for you to get your name and your visibility out there, especially if this will help you as a coach, as a healer, as a therapist, or a facilitator of psychedelic assisted therapy or resilience coaching. And there's no cost. If you have a story that is selected, we do all of the work to get the story polished and edited, approved by you, and shared with the world. There is a paid opportunity if you'd like to use this as a marketing activity. You can actually get your name on the cover with a small investment that also includes interviews with me and other marketing and media support. All right, so what questions do you have about the life writing process, about this idea of changing your narrative, and how sharing your story could help other people? Feel free to type into the chat. And so Eliane asks, what if someone makes up lies about you to hurt you and others believed in the lies? I'm going to take a sip of my chai here. Well, the best thing that you can do if someone has made up lies or stories about you is to live your truth. We can often spend so much energy and time trying to convince people of a new story, but I find that that can often deplete your energy. And instead, it's often helpful to look at what can I do to just live my truth, and recognizing that karma will catch up to the people who have said mean things or incorrect things about you. I find that the message of Gandhi, he said, let your life be your message, the way you live, the way you carry yourself. And if there's part of you that still feels hurt, you got to get that off your chest. So part of the things that we do in the Real Self-Love movement is help people to work through some of the narrative therapy prompts that are in my book, The Real Self-Love Handbook, so that you can let that go. Because if people hold an idea or an opinion about you and you keep fighting it or reliving it, you are also part of perpetuating it and helping it go on. So even if someone weren't spreading, terrible lies that are hurtful, even just misinformation, like people just get things wrong all the time. If you spend your time worrying about it and obsessing over it, you lose your energy. So let your life be your message. And that's what I would say to that. Are there any other comments or questions? I don't know if all of my apps are propagating through. I'm only seeing Facebook questions in here. So I don't know if anyone is watching on YouTube. Don't know. But feel free to type in. So another comment is, what does it mean when you've went through the process of evolution, but I find that I'm very guarded to protect my peace and authenticity of myself? Is there something to this? Well, I don't think that's a bad thing. Of course, if you find yourself being guarded and you don't take risks anymore, you don't engage with people anymore, you may find over time that that's not the most thriving way to exist. But if you've come through a process of getting rid of toxic people and ending toxic relationships and showing up as your authentic self, then it's a good thing that you're protecting your peace. Yeah? It's a good thing that you're discerning. You're using your judgment and discernment to choose who gets in your life and who doesn't. Right? So if you find, though, that you're being too much of a hermit and you're not engaging, then that's something to work through. A lot of what we do in the Real Self-Love movement is to help get a healthy amount of distance, because if you've made some progress, then we want these other older parts of us to get up to date, to know that you've been through your process of evolution. Is the threat still there? If it's not, then you can lower your guard. If you are super conscious, if you're being mindful of the relationships and the people that you allow into your space, then you can let down your guard, knowing that you've already activated your inner protector and warrior. If you still are having to go into situations where you're around people who are unsafe, then it might be normal and healthy for you to do that. Thank you, Shireen, for letting the folks on YouTube know that this did not work. I am back on my favorite program, Ecamm Live, and I have a bug report to share with the guys because for some reason it didn't work. All right. So Gerald asks, how do you write about your life experiences without hurting family members and friends? Well, there are two ways that I would answer that, G. And the first one is sometimes you just need to write for yourself. And I know you've heard me say this. When we do this journaling, when we have people come to Stories with Soul, or I have a new workshop that you can do totally on your own. It's called The Introduction to LifeWriting, using the hero's journey. So you can do this process by yourself. You don't necessarily have to tell other people, but by writing the story, you start to unburden yourself and unburden the parts of your psyche that have been carrying the weight. You don't ever have to share it with someone. And that's like the biggest thing that people need to hear, is that going through the writing process, you liberate so much energy. You give these parts of your subconscious a voice. You give them permission to speak, to yell, to say whatever they need to say, accusatory, blaming, whatever they need to get out. Let them get it out in the writing process. And you never have to share it with anyone. But that process in and of itself can be so healing and so cathartic. When we do this in group sessions and people are able to share their stories in a very protected environment so that the family members are never going to hear the story or read the story, that too is very healing, because very often we need to be witnessed. There are parts of us that need to be acknowledged that what we went through was hurtful and painful and awful. And we can do that in a safe, healing environment. The other way that you can write your story without harming family members who are still alive is to write it using a pen name and changing the names of the people. So we have many authors. We have a beautiful author who shared in one of our, I think it was Life After Trauma, another book that we did with authors from around the world. She chose to change her name and changed names and genders of the people in the stories, but she wanted the message to get out, because these books are going out to people around the world, and reading one of these stories, she knew she could help other people. Sorry, my throat is like super dry here. So that's how I would do that. So hopefully that helps. Not a hermit, but I think that certain behaviors trigger me to go into protective mode. And that's totally fine. So the question I would pose to you, if you feel like you need to be super protective of your space and your peace, is that protective nature harming you? So if you're not going into hermit mode, that's great. Is it revving up your nervous system such that you feel like you're always on guard? Well, over time, that stress response can be very damaging to your well-being. So in those cases, if you're finding that you're still reactive, then it might be worthwhile to spend time with a coach or a therapist or joining a group where you can share and start to process that. Often I find that when we're overly triggered, it's because there's still unprocessed material. All right. So I hope that this little brief overview was helpful. Maybe, maybe not. Excuse me. And I hope that any of you who have a story to share about resilience or about sacred medicine, shamanic journeys, frog or toad medicine, cacti, fungi, even chemical sacred medicines like ketamine or MDMA, LSD. Feel free to visit us at makeyourmarkglobal.com and you'll learn more about our author program. And the top 10 traits of highly resilient people, the second edition, is also going to be coming out, and we'd love to hear some more stories of resilience. All right? So, thank you for being here. Thank you for the comments. Thank you, Shireen, again, for popping over to YouTube and letting folks know. And Shireen says, yes, so therapeutic to let our feelings out in a safe place, written and witnessed by others. Yes. And wow, is that protective nature hurting me? Brilliant question. Absolutely. Yeah, we've got to ask these questions. And Shireen, I know you know this already, but we know we have these parts that get activated, the protector part or the perfectionist part, and they're only trying to serve us and serve our survival. But sometimes we have to ask, at what price? Are there consequences to those behaviors? And can we address them? So there you have it, my friends. I have been happy to connect with you. I think I'm going to go and nurse my dry throat. Today I have been doing back to back to back interviews. And Jazz, you said you left me a question. Let's see. Jazz says, I'm a nurse, worked 17 years in the same unit, but now I applied to a different role, which is very hard to get out of my comfort zone. I want this new change, and it goes against my mind. They didn't even make a decision yet. I've lost sleep. How to get over it. So, sounds like I'm not sure what your question is. You applied to a new role, you want this change, but you're losing sleep. I would invite you to journal on that. What is it that is coming up for you that has you so activated such that you're losing sleep? You said there's a little bit of fear of getting out of your comfort zone, but you already took the step by applying for a new position. So I would really tune in. If you visit my website, andreapennington.com, you'll see that I have several guided meditations. They're also on the Insight Timer app. You'll see that in these guided meditations, I lead you through a process called the attunement process. And you can actually tune in and find out, what are these parts of you trying to say? In other words, the part of you that is feeling anxious and keeping you up at night. In the world of internal family systems, we say that every part has a valid reason for doing what it's doing. And so, is there some unprocessed stuff from the past that has you feeling like being out of your comfort zone is scary and it's keeping you up at night? I would do the journaling and guided meditation process that's included in in my on my website. The one that I'm thinking about now is called the attunement process. The attunement process is a 5-step guided mindfulness meditation process that will help you bring calm to the body and brain. It helps you drop into the heart and tune into compassion, because we need to have a little more acceptance and openness to start investigating these fearful reactions. And then through the attunement process, I lead you in a guided connection with your parts. So it could be an inner child, an inner teenager, or this part that freaks out. And by getting into contact with them, we can then have a dialogue. We can ask questions. We can let these parts be heard and seen and felt. You can also do that in journaling, but with the guided meditation process, you have my voice guiding you. If you're not a visual person, don't worry. You just listen to the guided meditation and then do the journaling. And that can help a lot in identifying why. Why am I so amped up about this situation in my life? And for most of us, we need to learn how to balance and ground the nervous system. So the attunement meditation will help you do that. So it's at AndreaPennington.com. It's also on the Insight Timer app. If you're into Insight Timer, I host lives over there. I was just live there last night as well. So these are good. And so yeah, if you're finding that you get anxious for no reason, you need to find out what the reason is, because there's always a reason. Yes, some people do have generalized anxiety that is not provoked by past trauma. It could be something strange going on in the nervous system. But since you've already linked it to applying for this new position and fear of getting out of your comfort zone, I would investigate that. There's a part of you that's afraid. And the question is, why? And when you go into and do this hero's journey investigation, you can find out that there's a part of you that might be holding on to fears and beliefs in the past. You'll see at AndreaPennington.com that I invite you to the Real Self-Love Movement. It's totally free. And in the Real Self-Love Movement, I host a live call on Zoom that's private. And you can literally ask me questions and get answers. Let's see if I can show you that. Voila. So the Real Self-Love Movement includes downloads of my guided meditations, past interviews, and live Q&A sessions on the second Tuesday of the month. So we get live on Zoom. You can ask questions, do the guided meditations, do the journaling, and then you can get processing with us live in real time. Because there's always a reason for what's going on. Whether it's anxiety, it's depression, could be chronic fatigue, it could be any of these other manifestations. There's always a reason. All right? So I thank you for tuning in. I welcome your feedback. You can feel free to reach out and let me know, was this helpful? Was it not? Are you ready to share your story in one of our group books? I would certainly love to bring your voice to the world if you feel like you're ready for that. So check us out at Make Your Mark Global or AndreaPennington.com, and you'll see links to how you can get involved in one of these book projects. All right? So until we meet again, my friend, please remember this. You are a gift to the world. So share your presence with passion. Much love, everyone. Bye.